Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for tuning in. I'm Aki.
I'm Joe.
I'm Dika.
And I'm Andrew.
And welcome to Bench Press.
Yay!
So in this podcast, we will be covering a broad range of socio-political issues surrounding the topic of peace.
So if you're looking for casual yet insightful conversation on anything related to peace and how we can achieve it, this is the podcast for you.
And yeah, we're very excited today because we're finally launching our first episode, and we hope that our audience is as excited as we are. Yep.
Yes, but before anything else, before we dive deeper into the details of our podcast, why don't we start with a brief introduction of ourselves? Okay, I'll start it. So I'm Aki. I'm a Filipino-Japanese. I was born and raised in the Philippines, and I just moved to Japan, I think 9 years ago. And I'm still learning the culture, but I enjoy it because it's something new from what I grew up. And if you were gonna ask me, why am I in this podcast? And the reason and the most influential factor would be me being as an international relations student, or in short, IR. So being an IR student, we were brought into a different perspective in viewing the world and viewing the different issues that we face every single day. And this is how I got very interested with the topic of peace. And I have been really active in participating different extracurricular activities in terms with regards about peace. So how about you, Joe?
Yeah. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Joe. I am from Jakarta, Indonesia, but I'm currently living in Kyoto, Japan, as a student. So I'm currently pursuing a master's degree in international relations at Ritsumeikan University here. And regarding why I'm in this podcast, well, first of all, Aki invited me. Thank you, Aki. And I actually had some interest in doing a podcast as well, so I was actually quite excited when Aki proposed the idea. And I wanted to be in this podcast because I enjoy having a good conversation, right? And I think having a good chat with interesting people has helped me grow a lot as a person. And I hope that this podcast can take me, and hopefully our audience as well, even further. So thank you, and let's get to Andrew.
Andrew. Okay, so as you have just heard from Joe, my name is Andrew. I am kind of the comic relief of this podcast, but I truly enjoy the privilege of joining this podcast. And I am also from Indonesia, specifically from Jakarta. And I graduated from university about half a year ago, majoring in the same major, international relations. And right now I'm doing internship in Jakarta. I did my graduation thesis on the topic of identity, national identity, and specifically the Chinese Indonesian identity as a marginal community in Indonesia. As you can see, I'm very interested in social issues, and I truly hope that from this podcast I can learn about other social issues, either ongoing, in the past, or even in the future, about social issues around the world. Dika, can you please introduce yourself?
Hello, guys. My name is Dika. I am from Indonesia. I'm from Makassar, and currently I'm living in Jakarta. About the past 10 years, I have been living in Japan, but now I'm currently in Jakarta because I just found a new job here in Jakarta as a banker. Why I am in this podcast? Because during my time in Kyoto with my fellow friends that are joining here today, I enjoy talking a lot with my friends, and many ideas spark throughout the conversation that we have, and I think I'm very excited to share the ideas that we have been talking about during our during our time in Japan to the world. So yeah, that is why I'm very excited to join this podcast. Thank you, Aki, for inviting me.
In case you haven't noticed, all of us are international relations students, and we actually graduated from the same university. And I guess this is how we also able to gather and to make this podcast very possible. And it's also actually one reason why we came up with the name of our podcast, which is Bench Press.
Wait. So you're saying that this is not a fitness podcast?
No. So, well, there's actually a story behind the name, right? So, you see, all of us come from the International Relations Department of Ritsumeikan University. And just outside of our faculty building, there's an area with a few picnic-style bench tables that many of us like to call the Gaijin bench. So, for those of you who are not familiar with the Japanese language, Gaijin basically means foreigners, people who are not from Japan, right? And we call that area the Gaijin bench because that place is usually where many of us international students hang out during lunchtime. And since many of us come from different backgrounds, this is also the place where we often share our experiences, learn more about each other's cultures, and talk about various issues. And so looking back, we noticed that we actually had a lot of very interesting conversations at the table. Maybe because the absence of a classroom setting kind of allowed us to have more freedom to go really deep into a broad range of topics. And so we kind of want to share that kind of experience and conversation with the broader audience. So the Gaijin Bench actually became a very big inspiration for us during the making of this podcast. And so when we were trying to pick a name for our podcast, our friend Dika suggested the name Bench Press. So Dika, why don't you tell us a bit more about your thought process and why you suggested that we go with Bench Press?
Okay. So, for this name, it was very random. I didn't thought about it before. So basically, I thought about this name because I was thinking about a word that associated to the bench, and during my thinking process, I was thinking, wait, bench press. Oh yeah, bench press, but not as a fitness bench press, but the press came from a wordplay, so it basically means from Gaijin bench plus press conference. So basically, the press conference, we wanted to share the ideas that sparked during our conversation in the bench, and with the motto of broadcasting the conversation that we are having at our bench to the world. So basically, we want to share our conversation and our thoughts during our time in the bench, during our time at the university. Yes. So,
I see. So, I guess to summarize it all, we chose the name bench press because if we think about it again, if you go to the gym, you get stronger physically. But if you listen to our podcast, you get stronger intellectually.
Ooh, Andrew, such a wise man.
All right.
Okay. Speaking of getting stronger intellectually, I have a question for your brains to be trained. So what is peace? How do you define it?
That's a good question. Okay, so I guess the very basic definition of peace would be the absence of war or the lack of violence. But of course, I think we can all agree that's a very generous definition. And for those who are familiar with peace studies, we know that this is what Johan Galtung has coined as negative peace. So the absence of war is a negative peace. But then there's also something called positive peace, which is basically creating a condition where peace can thrive. And this includes poverty eradication or ending social discrimination, among other things. But if you ask me personally, I think peace for me means being able to wake up, go outside, do my daily activities without having to worry about my safety, without having to fear prosecution or violence. Yeah.
Okay, Joe, that was very overwhelming. That was a very serious definition of peace, huh? Interesting, but very interesting nonetheless. I think the very core concept of peace is different from people to people. But for me, it's pretty similar to what you say, Joe. Peace is being able to wake up, being able to, take a bath, talk to friends, cycle every day, go to your favorite coffee shop, and just do it without fearing for your lives, for your family lives, or your freedom. and I think this is at least the very minimum basis of what we call peace. Unfortunately, for many, this is not the case. There are millions of peoples out there across the globe who wakes up every day fearing for their lives and for their freedom. And I truly wish that we can achieve the very minimum base of peace for every one of us.
Yeah, that's very interesting. But I agree that peace kind of has a different connotation from people to people. And I think another thing that we can think about is that peace can also differ. The concept of peace can also differ from one culture to another, right? So, for example, I guess if we think about the Japanese word for peace, heiwa, there's a word for harmony there, right? So, there's a connotation that we should prioritize the harmonious existence of the community over personal interests. So there's like a connotation of favoring the group over the individual as well in the Japanese definition of peace. So I think it's interesting to think about culture as well when it comes to defining peace.
Yeah, peace is a very there's a lot of different definition that we could put on it. But I want to ask you guys, do you think that given by the definition you have mentioned, do you think we are living in a very peaceful community at the moment, given that we are not at war at all, unlike before in the history?
No, for me, I think it's not yet our community is yet peaceful, because I think there are many people in this world is living under the threat of violence, as Joe mentioned and Andrew mentioned, and also cannot safely do their daily life in their conditions. So I think there are many arguments about this, but I think peaceful is yet it's still very far achievement from the standpoint that we are we are now today. But however, I think it's very achievable because if we do our part and we do our things together, I think peace is very achievable in the near future. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I also believe that it is achievable, but I would not say it would be easy. It will be really not easy because it needs a collective effort. It doesn't work that you do your job, I do mine, and that's it. We need to work together, right, to achieve peace.
I think one thing, rather than asking like whether or not peace is achievable, I think it's also regardless of whether or not peace is achievable, because I know that there's going to be many skeptics who think that human nature is bad, or humans are violent,
humans
or
are
something
evil.
like that. Or like if you're a realist kind of person, you would say that humans are capable of evil. But I think regardless of whether or not peace is achievable, it's still desirable. So even if peace is not achievable, it doesn't mean that peace is not desirable. So I think as long as there's a desire for peace, humans will always try to work to find a way to kind of achieve peace, however close, to get to peace as close as possible.
Well, that was very, very well said, Joe. I think what Aki said was very important. We need to work together, but we also need to start from the bottom, and that is knowing the problem, knowing the issue. I think coming up with a solution, we have to educate, the people around us about what issues we have surrounding us right now. And I think this is our main goal of our podcast. We would like to raise the awareness about the different socio-political issues that basically surrounds us every day.
Okay, let me wrap it up since we don't have all day talking about this. So for our definition of peace, we all agreed that it differs from person to person or from culture to culture. But I also think that we agreed in one thing, and that is being able to go outside without having fear is our minimum standard for peace. And in addition, we also acknowledge that we are living in a peaceful, I think most of the most peaceful era in the human history. But unfortunately, not everyone experienced the same thing. Not everyone gets to enjoy the privilege of living in a peaceful community. That is why we all agree that achieving peace is difficult, but it's not necessarily impossible as long as we desire it and the humanity desires for peace, right?
Right.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the summary, Aki. That's wonderful. Yeah. Anyway, I think, yeah, you're right. We should be wrapping up our episode soon. So to our viewers, please look forward to our future episodes. We've prepared several topics relating to peace. We have an episode on the Myanmar coup. We also have an episode on the Indian farmers' protests, Singapore national identities, among others. So it's gonna be fun. Look forward to it.
Yeah, and that's it for our episode 0 podcast from us, Bench Press, and see you on the next episode.
Peace
Peace out.
out.